Am I on? Oh, hello. If we are able to take our seats, we're going to make a start. Diolch. Prynhawn da, good afternoon. My name is Louise Miles-Payne and I am the Director of Craig Cymru. I have coordinated with the event. The green dress is very much on purpose. I've also got a cold, so please forgive my voice. I'm glad that I'm not doing the majority of the speaking today. A warm welcome to the Welsh launch of the Theatre Green Book, a second edition. I'm really delighted to see everybody in the room today and those watching online. Our first live stream event, so woo! Your presence, whether in the room or online, reflects the growing commitment to within our sector to embedding sustainability in everything we do. Today marks a significant milestone in our collective journey towards environmental responsibility within the arts. The Theatre Green Book, now in its comprehensive second edition, brings together guidance on productions, operations and buildings into one accessible guide. We are privileged to have with us the visionaries behind this amazing initiative, Paddy Dillon and Lisa Berger here today, who are going to share their insights and the remarkable progress achieved so far. Their dedication has been instrumental in steering the industry in towards a more sustainable future. Also, we're joined by Steve Morris, Head of Operations at Wales Millennium Centre, and Tom Naylor, Freelance Production Manager, who are going to talk about their hands-on experience using the Green Book on productions and in the building side of things. And we are also joined by Christian Wallace, Technical Director at the Old Vic, whose expertise was invaluable in the Green Book's journey since its inception and during his time at Charcoal Blue. This event is more than just a launch, it's a call to action. It underscores our shared responsibility to embed sustainability at the heart of the creative processes. Whether you're here in the room or watching online, you are part of the movement shaping the future of Welsh theatre. A heartfelt thanks to the Arts Council of Wales and to Charcoal Blue for supporting this event. Together we are building a resilient and more eco-conscious theatre community in Wales. A little bit of housekeeping. We've got some Welsh translation available today, so during the Q&A, please feel free to speak in whichever language you feel fit. Apologies to those watching online. You won't get the translation live in the room, but our speakers will repeat the question for those watching online. I'm going to hand over to the panel now. So they're going to take you through the panel section, and then there's going to be time at the end for the Q&A. And then I'm going to be back to talk about next steps for the Theatre Green Book in Wales.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lou. And just to correct you on one thing, this is so not about two people making this. The Theatre Green Book, from the very outset, has been made by theatre makers in all places, working at all scales, on work of all different sorts, and everyone who joins becomes part of that. This really is something that theatre has made for itself. And this is a particularly good moment to come together here, because I don't know if any of you noticed, but the world is not in a very good place at the moment, and reading the news is not a very cheerful experience. But with the Theatre Green Book, collectively, together across many nations, we have made something which is working and which is making things better. And that really is something to be excited about and something to feel positive about. We've done it by working together. And that was before we'd even invented the name of the Theatre Green Book. We were bringing people together. The reason being that we knew this was something we had to do collectively. So from the outset, this has been a collective initiative, a grassroots initiative, something coming from theatre to move us forward. And if you look in the back page of this is a slightly dodgy clicker. On the back page of the Theatre Green Book, you'll just see just some of the literally hundreds, quite possibly now thousands, of theatre makers of all kinds, from costume to directors to building managers to designers of all sorts, who have brought their expertise, your expertise, to make this work. We really want to thank those who have funded the second edition of the Theatre Green Book and provided their support. We've done so much of it just by all of us giving our time, but of course there are some costs, and we really want to thank them for supporting us in that. And also the group of theatres. There are many, many theatres, as you all know, probably including many of your own, who use the Theatre Green Book. But when we were making version 2, we brought together a group of a dozen theatres of all sizes in all parts of these 4 nations to give feedback, to try things out, to make comment on what was wrong with the first edition, what we could do better, and a huge thanks to all of them. What we have tried to put into the second edition was really all of the things that we learnt from the first few years.
Yeah, you might be wondering, why did we bother with a second edition at all? And for those of you who are completely new to the Theatre Green Book, we will, during this presentation, cover what's in the thing as well. But we were aware that some people have been using it for ages and some are new. So we want to tell you, first of all, why we thought it was good to have a second edition. Well, the fact is, you remember, came out very, very quickly. And with 3 years' experience, like everything, we could see that we could make it easier to use. Also, during that time, we brought in new partners from Europe, and there's nothing like seeing what happens when you've got a lot of people who are using something for the first time without the UK experience of thinking about sustainability, to make us realise that we needed to keep this as clear as possible. At all stages, what we're trying to do is to make this painless, because we're aware that everybody's got so many demands on their time and on their cash. Previously, we had 3 volumes of the Theatre Green Book, and you had to sort of know that it was there and what it was to be able to use them. So we thought, right, let's bring it all together into 1 volume, both where you start and how you move through between productions, operations, buildings, etc. And this layered approach, we felt it would be easier so that for people, whatever level somebody was within the organisation or their level of familiarity, there was an easy way to go through it, so that there was an introduction to why, and then through the different volumes, and then through to self-certification. Also recognising, though, that some people have got a lot of experience and they need to be able to navigate easily and find that. I just flicked over there, didn't I? Self-certification, there was certainly quite some demands from people to say, actually, we'd like to be able to tell people that we are at basic or we're working towards intermediate. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, and those who've absolutely been following that journey. Touring and co-production was sort of across the volumes. We could completely see that this is a big area where people can really start to work more environmentally, sustainably, and some additional guidance would be really helpful. And then finally, the new support tools that we brought in.
And we're going to talk about those a little bit later. Oh, I think that's working again. So what we're going to do now is just really quickly page turn through the second edition of the Theatre Green Book. Many of you will be familiar with it already, but it helps us all just to go back to what this is about. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to address. We have to make our sector sustainable. How can we trust what's in the Theatre Green Book? Well, because it gives us everything that we need. It gives us the framework. It gives us best practice guidance, standards, measurement system. Perhaps most of all, because it's guidance that comes from all of you. It comes from practical theatre makers who know what the challenges are and know that there are some things that are really difficult to change. But it's also underpinned by sustainability expertise, our brilliant partners, Bureau Happold, who can tell us that, yes, these are the priorities, these are the impacts. This is where we really need to concentrate our energy. So what do we need to do to be sustainable? What's a sort of primer for sustainable theatre and performing arts. And as most of you know, we divide this challenge into 3 areas. We've got to make our productions more sustainable, we've got to make our operations more sustainable, and of course our buildings. For many of us who have buildings, it's the biggest carbon emitter of all. We have to tackle them too. And to structure this journey, and it is a journey, nobody is about to become perfectly net zero overnight. It's going to take time. The world is not engineered for sustainability. It doesn't help us. It's a transition. It's going to take some years. If you're a small company, 2-3 years. If you're a really large company, perhaps 10 years. It's going to take time. It's a journey. And so we provide staging posts, milestones on that journey. Basic, which is not that hard to achieve. There are many organisations across the UK now which are at that level. And it isn't perfect, it's not net zero, but you're on the journey. And in every respect of what you do, you're doing something more sustainably through intermediate to advanced, which is an equivalent to net zero. It's as sustainable as we can be.
So headline level, we're staying at headline level at the minute. What do we need to do to make our theatres sustainable? So in our productions, whatever size of theatre you are, what we're doing, what we were, many of us, certainly I was at my old theatre, what we were doing, we were taking raw materials, putting them on the stage, maybe keeping a few things, but far, far too much moving to landfill. We've got to move that to a circular economy. In our operations, we've got to keep to those buzzwords of reduce, source what we use sustainably, and reuse or recycle everything we can across all the operations of our buildings. And in the buildings themselves, we want to insulate, so we need less energy, make our systems efficient, so we use less energy, generate renewable energy where we can, as here at WMC, and support biodiversity and use less water.
So there's another piece of good news. We know what the answers are. We know how to do this. We're no longer in the stage we were 5-10 years ago of sitting around in rooms saying, how can we make theatre sustainable? By bringing everybody together, by listening, we know what the answers are. So the next question is, how do we start? And we've introduced with the 2nd edition of the Theatre Green Book a kind of pre-stage, calling it preliminary, which is just making sure that you can get your organisation lined up in the right direction to make this journey easier. It's not hard to do. It's commitment. It's saying, yes, this matters to us. Of course we want to make theatre without harming the planet, and we're going to do it. It's saying we've got a green committee that's planning our actions, that's bringing the expertise from all parts of the organisation. We've worked out, using the Theatre Green Book, an action plan. What are the next steps? What do we need to do, not to become perfect, but just to reach the next level, one step at a time? And we know how we're going to gather the quite simple data we need. How much electricity does our building use? That sort of thing. We know who's going to do that, and we know how we're going to share it with our staff, our audiences, our stakeholders. That will take most of you a morning to sit down together, work out who's going to do what, agree on the commitment, agree on the action plan. It's not a big ask. If everybody in this room, and perhaps you already have, can register on the Theatre Green Book website, reach that stage, then we're on the way. And I believe from talking to many theatres before that we probably already are a good way along the journey. From there, we know what the next few years looks like, and we are now in the critical phase. If we want to make our sector sustainable by 2030, and we're going to talk about this later, it's possible. It really is possible. If we want to make it sustainable by 2030, then the next 4 or 5 years are the final straight. It's not next year we'll think about it. It's not round the corner. It's absolutely right now, and that's what the journey looks like that will take all of us towards sustainability.
So moving in now to the next level of detail, what's happening in our productions that we can start to work more sustainably? It's about thinking differently in the selection of our materials. The pyramid, some of you will be very familiar with this from book 1, starting with, can I do without it entirely, the most sustainable option of all, right through thinking about different ways of achieving the effect that the designer wants. Maybe you get all the way to the bottom and say, no, actually, we really, really need this very large polystyrene wall. but at least you'll have gone through that process. Really important always to remember, we're still trying to improve our craft all the time. We're not saying, let's not make theatre. We're saying, how do we make spectacle? How do we continue to engage, entertain, inspire our audiences with shows, but do it in a sustainable way? We need to think about where the materials come from, whether they're reused, remodeled, recycled, the good new materials and the bad new materials. Within the Theatre Green Book, there's lots of guidance on all of these things. It's still there. It's now sitting within the detailed guidance section. Also, the recognition that we know everyone has a part to play. One of the reasons why we're quite keen on green committees and a green organisation is so that we can recognise it can't be just one person within an organisation. It can't be just one person within a production who makes this happen. It needs everybody, and we really hope that with the Theatre Green Book, we give you the materials so that you can see how everybody can play their part. We recognise the life of a production and those key decisions that get taken at every stage within the show, starting with the invitation. Always really, really important to make sure you're not bringing in a creative team without having spoken to them about your ambitions for sustainable production, and going all the way through to the get out at the end. What are you going to do with that show? How are you going to deconstruct it so that you can reuse some of the components? And then for each of the areas, productions, buildings, operations, basic, intermediate and advanced, you'll get to see these standards where you can go in and you can click. Blue are the essential things, white are the things that are going to help you achieve each level. And all of this is on an Excel spreadsheet, so hopefully really easy for people to get in there and do it.
How many of you here have worked on a production that's at least at basic Theatre Green Book standard? Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I hope in the Q&A we'll have a chance to share some experiences. And I hope too that across the networks here in South Wales and across Wales, you're able to start sharing your expertise, what you've learnt with other theatre makers who aren't yet so far along the journey. That's the crucial part of how we spread this. Sustainable operations, going to go through this really fast so we do have some time to talk at the end. We've divided it, as we did in the first version of the Theatre Green Book, into 6 areas. Paper and digital, digital's a big one. Food and drink, managing buildings, that's managing the building, not upgrading it and improving it. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Travel and transport, waste, contracts and procurement, and provide the guidance, provide the standards to help you tackle them. So much of this, and we've really learnt this from spending time with theatres across Europe and beyond indeed, something that is true of every theatre, every organisation, is you make progress by working together. If you can't get the whole organisation engaged, communicating, then sooner or later you're going to hit a ceiling. So that communication is really vital. The main thing on this slide is the top left-hand corner. Don't waste time on things you can't change. We've spent, I think, in our sector a lot of time worrying about things that we can't actually influence that much, how audiences get to the stage, for instance. There are things we can do, they're all in the Green Book, but it's not something we can completely change. So we need to focus on the things where we own the decisions, we own the choices, and we can make real change. We've got diagrams, just as we did in the first edition, for each of those areas, and we've got standards that will enable you to reach basic level, which again, how many of you have got to basic for operations? It's really interesting, and this is completely our experience, that a lot of organisations start with the productions. Of course we do, that's what matters, that's who we are. But it's really important too that we tackle this other stuff. Don't be scared of operations, none of it's difficult. It's mostly about just finding the headspace, and we know how hard that is in theatre at the moment, but finding the headspace to organise yourselves, and we do now have support tools to make that easier.
And then your buildings, we're going to hear a little bit afterwards, more about buildings. As we were saying before, those are the key steps. Not all of this is going to cost money. Many of those things about insulating and changes in behaviour are not going to cost you any money, and you'll see savings as well as carbon savings. But those are the priorities in order: insulate, think about the efficiency, the renewables, and the biodiversity. And again, we've got handy little graphics, which hopefully will appeal to some, so it can go more widely, and there's lots of detailed guidance. But the crucial thing is about making a plan. Even if you haven't got any money, you need to have a plan which says this is how over time we would make our building more efficient and more effective. It's the sort of thing then that should be taken to boards and funders. Otherwise, you do end up in a position where the whole building starts failing. I know it's really, really difficult, but it is a question of responsibility that we can start to see what needs to happen. And then, as I was saying previously, investing in sustainability will cut your energy costs, as well as the addressing the carbon. And there you go. There again is the standard.
How many of your theatres and organisations are facing financial pressure at the moment? This is such an easy question in a room full of theatre makers. How many of you would like to cut your energy costs? Well, exactly. It is low-hanging fruit. Most buildings that Lisa and I have worked with or talked to, if they're starting from scratch, can find probably a quarter of their energy costs without a big amount of investment. Of course, it gets harder from there. But if you haven't done anything, you will be able to find low-hanging fruit. So measuring progress, and the main way we measure progress is by what we're doing differently. If you don't do stuff differently, make your productions, manage your operations, change your building, of course you're not going to become more sustainable. So with the Theatre Green Book, that's what we measure, and we've now got this self-certification system. You can register on the website, download the forms, and then you can get logos, certificates, whatever. We don't check it. It's for you to self-certify, which you can share with your audiences, stakeholders, funders, and others. And we really, really want you to do that. And I'll tell you why, which is that I think a lot of us in the first years of this journey wanted to fly under the radar, because we all know that if you say we're being sustainable, somebody will say, oh, no, you're not. You know, they'll find the one thing you're doing unsustainably and stick it in the newspaper. We're going to reach tipping point together when everybody's doing it, or when most of us are saying publicly, this show is basic. We're not claiming more than that, but it's basic. That show is intermediate. This is a journey that we're on, and then all the other organisations who aren't doing this yet will be saying, okay, we've got to catch up, everybody's doing this. So that's why we've put so much stress on this. Please, please do register. Please, please do share. Please, please do tell everybody what you're doing. So to go up through the stages, preliminary we've talked about, to reach basic level for your organisation as a whole, it's about getting a good proportion of your shows hitting basic level, and all of them trying. We know that some shows will get away. That's fine, it's part of it. Most of your operations up to a certain level, and having a plan for your building. It's not that hard. Even for quite large organisations, reaching basic level might take a year. Most of you, with your productions already working strongly, could get there in a few months. It's not that difficult, but once you're there, you really will be on the journey, and you will understand the principles, what the future looks like, what those final steps towards advanced are going to involve. And through the next steps, intermediate, advanced, they follow exactly the same principles.
And then how can you measure what's been happening over time? Well, hopefully you've got your certificates and you're seeing that and you're creating some leadership, but you'll be able to therefore look at what level you are at in each of the volumes. Also, within the support tools, you can measure how much is being reused and recycled. And also, if you want to, the tools now have carbon calculation for the key areas. Not everybody wants to do it. We certainly don't need to do it to be as part of the Theatre Green Book until you get to advanced stage. But certainly there are quite a few who'd like to see that.
So what do you need to do all of this? You should find everything on the website. The Theatre Green Book itself, we flicked through most of the pages, or many of the pages of it just now. Behind, could you go back one? Behind each one, there's a volume of detailed guidance. that goes into details of everything from wigs to planning capital projects to being more sustainable in your digital use. And then for each area, we've got a support tool, a production calculator to help you assess your shows, an operations tracker to keep track of your operations, that's the tool I was talking about earlier, and a building survey tool to make a plan for your building. The next one, you'll find them all in the resources area on the website. They're all free to download. This is just a glimpse of the production calculator. And this is an example of the whole guiding principle behind the Theatre Green Book is we do this by doing it together. And wherever we go, every country we talk in or come to, we've found expertise that's become part of the Theatre Green Book. The production calculator was a brilliant collaboration of those organisations spread across Britain, Holland, Denmark, Germany, that put it together. And each of them had been doing something in a particular way, the way they were working with costumes, the way they were calculating sets. And we could put them all together on a series of kind of gigantic Zoom calls. We put it together, and that's what you find in the production calculator now. It's not perfect. It's clunky in some ways. Using it, you'll find ways to improve it. That's why we make them as Excel spreadsheets you can download and play around with. And then share back. Please share back. That's how it works. That's how we can keep making it better.
And you may notice those are tending to be larger organisations there. Please don't feel that this is all about large organisations. We absolutely know from the beginning it's smaller organisations who've been working very sustainably for a long time. And there's lots of good practice that's been adopted and brought in. The thing about the Green Book is that hopefully this gives us a language and a framework so we can all keep sharing. Just when we were in Taiwan, we had met some fantastic puppeteers who, shall I keep going?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just pages, and there are webinars which show you how to complete
Yeah, there are
all
little
of the
how-to
production
videos on the website
calculators.
to show how to use it. There's an operations tracker. How do I keep track of the 2,000 things that I need to think about from plastic cups in the foyers through to switching off lights in the corridors, and the tracker, which was put together again by a number of organisations using it on the ground. This is not top-down, it's bottom-up. It's coming from all of you, which will help you do that through simple questionnaires and simple questions. And the lists of suggestions below means that when we say, if you want to be sustainable, you're going to need to write a policy for digital, your websites and stuff. You don't have to start Googling, it's all there because people have done it for us. We can't make theatre sustainable one theatre at a time. None of us have time. You all have shows to make and audiences to look after. If one person does it, we can all use their work by sharing it through the Green Book. So you'll find all the policies you need just to copy and paste, or even just retitle and stick on your server. You'll find them right there.
And all these spreadsheets which we created because people said that's what they want. It's much easier to pick up something and fill it in that someone else has created, but be able to adapt it, as it's all on Excel. Here is the building survey tool, which again is a really good example of something that you can adapt to build your building plan.
Everything that you can do to a building to make it more sustainable is on that spreadsheet. There are 71 or something things. They're all there, and there are questions to help you work out whether they might be relevant to you or not. At some point you'll need professional advice, but you can start out by yourself.
We realised as part of the second edition we needed to upgrade the website. We work with a fantastic actor and his partner who do all of this, and now everything you'll find is on the website. Thank you, Laura. We've only got 10 minutes left. So please go in there and explore, and you'll find that's where you can sign up. Laura, our fantastic producer who sat at the back of the room, we should have introduced her earlier on. These are our trialers, and they helped us in the development of the second edition by testing everything to make sure it worked. At the time, they said that they would all be basic by the beginning of this year. By George, they all did it. Some are actually onto intermediate as well, I think, National Theatre of Scotland. So we have proved that this is all working. And I think, Laura, we've got 220 organisations who are now signed up and following the procedure of the Theatre Green Book. Some signed up to be at advanced, so that's rather an exciting thing. We've talked about networks. Networks are really crucial. This is the Trialers network, and it's the way of sharing expertise for people who, if you're a bit stuck, if it's just a way of recognizing you can have a coffee with somebody or inspiring each other. I mean, we talk about collaboration a lot. Yes, we do collaborate, and it's the most wonderful thing about theatre. But let's face it, we are all slightly competing, and it is always slightly nice to know that you're the one who's actually cracked operations, and you can say, well, of course I'll show you how I did it, and of course you can see my policies. So this is a really good way of keeping us learning, keeping together, keeping ourselves up when there are so many reasons to feel a bit down. The Theatre Green Book itself, thanks to Arts Council England, we had a lump of funding for this year only, which enabled us to employ both a director and a producer on a part-time basis. And it's meant that we've really been able to upscale our activities as well as the development work on the book and the website. There have been so many events and other opportunities as a way to really try now and help the theatre community to share and take advantage of all these new resources. We have a steering committee. Those are the members of the steering committee. There's nobody there from Wales at the moment. Sadly, National Theatre of Wales were one of the original signatories to the steering committee memo. There will be a new Welsh partner at some point. Underneath the steering committee, we've got operations committees. These are all volunteers who are giving their time and their expertise to keep developing the resources, answering the myriad of questions that come in, developing new toolkits, identifying where we need new case studies. Is it me still? Yeah. And the Theatre Green Book has become rather successfully internationally as well. Some of you know the story that right from the beginning, we were approached by the DTHG, a very big membership organisation in Germany. They wanted a translation. We said, don't just translate it, adapt it as well. And that principle has just been expanding like crazy. You can see there, I think actually that map, we've got another version of it now, which has got even more dark green. Dark green is where people are actually using the Theatre Green Book. Light green is where there's a Theatre Green Book network. Light green is where people are using it and there are translations, but they haven't yet got a formal network. And as you can see, we really are an international movement or international community. The new international webinar series, which is always free. The whole point of all of this, it's all free to everybody to access all the time. It's all about disseminating information across.
So we're in, and there are multiple translations, which we won't go into yet. I don't think we have a Welsh translation yet. We would love to, obviously, have one. Can we go on to the next one? So we'll just flick through some slides. The DTHG, the Deutsches Theatertechnisches Gesellschaft. I speak no German, but I've learned to say that. Is our partner in Germany. That's going really well. That was the launch in Copenhagen. They're fantastic. Lots of expertise there. That was the launch in Amsterdam. And a really exciting one is the network of theatres. It's Europe's biggest theatre network, the European Theatre Convention, with whom we've been working for a couple of years now. On the next one, they've got members across Europe. I think it's 70 members in 32 countries or something of the sort. What we've done there, and this will be something really interesting to talk about later, is take a group of their members. We took, I think, 10 in the first year, 9 in the first year. We're taking 8 this year. Help them get up to basic, which they've all done. And then this year, they're mentoring 2 other theatres to get them up to basic. We can't make theatre sustainable one theatre at a time. It's by spreading expertise, it's by helping each other that we're going to take whole networks and lift them up towards sustainability. And to talk about how that might work in Wales later would be really interesting. Through them, we've been working with the European Commission. Some of you might remember the European Union that we were once members of in a happy past. But through our mates across the channel, we're staying very much connected With it, the European Commission has endorsed the Theatre Green Book as a pathway for European theatre, by which I mean us as well, obviously, to reach net zero. And we've worked out with them a timeline for how that's achievable. Next one. We all remember when, back in the day, people were saying, we're going to be net zero by 2030 or by 2035 or by whatever date it was, without any of us really knowing how we were going to do it. We do know now, because the Theatre Green Book sets this out as a transition, as a journey, and measures the steps along that journey, we can say, yes, this is what we're going to have to do to get to intermediate. This is what we're going to have to do to advance. This is what we're going to find difficult. This is what we need to start thinking about now. And we know there are theatres that have mapped out that path. And yes, it is possible, one step at a time. Basic by the end of next year. That's not hard. Any of you in this room could do that. Many of you probably are very, very close if you're not there already. These are not impossible targets. And if theatre can become sustainable, large parts of it can become sustainable by the end of 2030, then that's a signal to the rest of culture that this journey can be done, that we're not compromising the work, that we're still making great shows, and we are doing it without damaging the planet. And then we really are, we know we're a small sector, but then we really are starting to leverage influence beyond our size. We've done that by talking the whole time, by talking in meetings exactly like this one to bring in expertise. Next one. We know how busy everybody is, and we know that it's right that our focus is on making great shows. But we don't have any choice about this. If we can't find time for it, the climate crisis isn't going to shrug its shoulders and walk away. It's still going to be there. And if we leave it too late, then governments will impose on us legislation that makes our work impossible. It's because we've started learning how to do this for ourselves that we have a chance of surviving the climate crisis and still making great work.
So, here we go. If you go onto the Theatre Green Book website, that's not exactly what you'll see. I'm not quite sure. Oh, this is about signing up. Yeah, this is where you go onto the Theatre Green Book website to sign up. Please do that, because it's a way then that we can keep in touch with everybody, let you know about events, and that as a way that we can then also liaise with Croy Cymru so that they can also see who in Wales is signing up and interested. There are options here for organisations to sign up, but individuals as well. So please feel able to do both.
This press on. I don't think we've got time for the movie. We'll show the movie at the end. It's well worth it.
Yeah.
I think a place to end, really, goes back to where we started, that in this very, very gloomy time that the world's going through, this is a good news story. And let's not lose the joy. It's not all about restriction, it's not all about gloom, it's also about opening creative doors to thinking differently about how we make work and why we make work and how we engage with the planet that we live on and make work that's sensitive to it. And that is exciting. All of these shows, and this is just a random selection, have reached Theatre Green Book standards. They're made in ways that are responsibly thinking about how we live on this planet and are still making wonderful, wonderful work. So if you haven't already found it, you can scan the QR code, get onto the website. Most of you, I'm sure, already have. And the Theatre Green Book version 2 is now officially launched in Wales and is there for all of us to use. Thanks so much for inviting us along.
Hello there. Nice to see so many people here in the audience, and for such an exciting, obviously, launch of such an exciting project here across Wales. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Steve Morris. I'm head of venue operations here at the Wales Millennium Centre, and part of my responsibility, or one of the major part of my responsibility, is the day-to-day running on the operational management of the site here, which, as you're all aware, is quite a big, complex site. Number of organisations working within the footprint, and obviously, as you're well aware, quite a few high-profile sort of shows that run through the Donald Gordon Theatre there quite frequently. But just to try and explain how we became involved with, obviously, Paddy and Lisa in relation to this fantastic project. From an organisational perspective, obviously, we recognise, obviously, the climate crisis and the need to change and how we could actually engage with that and support that from an organisational perspective. And we were looking for a framework from an organisational perspective to try and encompass the myriad of different facets then of performances, as we're all aware, take place within our organisations. But obviously, from our perspective, quite a large footprint we occupy, and it's trying to understand something that we can actually engage with, roll out across the organisation to get all our departments working together to achieve what we need to do to obviously support the climate crisis. And obviously, having met Paddy and Lisa and spoken to them extensively around what the Theatre Green Book was doing, obviously I wasn't involved in version 1, but becoming involved in version 2 has been massive for us. Being involved in the pilot, it's been fantastic to be able to sort of split it up into the 3 areas of, let's say, building, ops and productions, and breaking that down. So what I want to do today is just quickly explain to you what we've done as an organisation and give some examples of some of the work that we've carried out. Some of them are major sort of CapEx projects, but also appreciating the simpler things that we can all do to sort of support our organisations moving forward. So structurally, we basically looked at the Theatre Green Book, signed up to it, and then looked at the structure that has been created there. And what I got to say is it's a fantastic structure. Worked really, really well with us to actually use that as a framework to sort of engage with all the different departments, with splitting up into those 3 areas. We created 3 subgroups as part of our green team, as we're calling it, to encourage sort of leaders within those specific areas of those departments to sort of champion the efforts within those specific areas. What we do is we host quarterly meetings, and then obviously using the trackers within those specific areas, which are all on the website, using that as a template then to actually target specific areas. If I touch on basically buildings in particular, what we've focused in on is a couple of significant CapEx projects. You mentioned solar. We're fortunate enough to have quite an extensive series of solar panels across the roof, which has been a great asset to us, which obviously feeds into the utilities and driving down energy costs for us, and obviously reducing our sort of carbon footprint. And so that's been a massive piece of work for us, and I appreciate it's a big piece of work that we've been able to actually deliver, and perhaps it's not always available to sort of other organisations. Another thing, obviously, being based here within sort of the Cardiff area, we have become part of the district heat network system, which has supported us as well. So we've embraced that. But what I wanted to highlight there is looking at opportunities within your specific areas, within your communities, to see what is out there to be able to support whatever it is you're looking to engage with. There's certainly a lot of funding out there, and obviously with Welsh Government as well, the support that we've had around that has been a massive help to us. Something that we focused in on as well is utilities and driving down sort of energy costs, looking at our energy use and simple things like turning off the lights, encouraging staff to sort of engage with that. That's something that again we've focused in on, and again that's set within sort of the subgroups as part of the Theatre Green Book as well. And then another piece of work that we've actually carried out is to do with our chillers, looking towards the future, and obviously to do with climate change, looking at our systems and significant pieces of plant. Again, it's a piece of work that we got ongoing as a project, but again, that fits in obviously with the Theatre Green Book in relation to the buildings aspect of it. So again, looking at the subgroups, all of these projects that I've mentioned there are highlighted, and then we're targeting that and then feeding that and sharing that information across the organisation to highlight to other teams the work that's going on, and ultimately driving it forward using this as a platform. The other aspect is obviously operations, which is another sort of critical area for myself, and something like waste management. Again, it's something simple that we can all engage with, that we've done across the organisation, and looking at waste streams. Again, that's something that we've had massive gains on, in that we're up to 70% in relation to sort of recycling with that, and we've moved it from 42%. But again, that's a buy-in from across the organisation, using the framework of the Theatre Green Book and encouraging people and attendees here at the theatre to sort of to support that. 90% of our ticket sales are all digital as well. So again, we're quite fortunate with that. But again, that's something that we're actually keen on driving that forward, and it's been a massive benefit for us as an organisation. And then one other thing that we've been involved with is a thing called the Healthy Travel Charter Wales, which again is something that we've signed up to as an organisation. And it's so difficult to get your attendees at your different venues, how they actually travel to your venues can be critical and pivotal in relation to sort of supporting obviously climate change and driving down, and that's a focus for us at the moment. Obviously we got quite a large footfall through the building, come into the theatre to see the shows, but that's something that we're sort of working with at the moment. The productions piece, I think I'll let Tom explain a little bit about that, but I will say organisationally it's we found one of the most challenging areas to sort of engage and to look at how we're managing that, but again, the nature of the work that we all do is absolutely critical that we get on top of that, and we're sort of driving that forward and leading on that. So, but again, I can't emphasise it enough. The Theatre Green Book is a fantastic framework, easy to sort of use. I found it easy to use. The challenging aspect has been once you've set the framework up within your organisation, people buy into it, they're enthused with it. Everybody wants to support, obviously, driving down or supporting the issues we got around climate change. We all recognise it as individuals, and it's been a fantastic asset for us as an organisation, and hopefully we can continue supporting it and moving it forward. So that's it for myself, so I'm sure we'll take some questions later.
Thanks, Steve. I was hoping you'd start the trend of sitting down. I just want to go just to what you said last, Paddy, about the joy of it. For me as a production manager, it's just another challenge. I think most production managers are just problem solvers. So I think it sort of, if you look at it like that, it's quite a useful way in. Nice to see some people I know here. You'll all be happy that they give me a time limit. And there's someone at the back. And I got a script. I'm going to stick to it. If you know me, take a long approach. For those of you who don't, I'm a freelance production manager. I've looked after the last two shows here at the WMC. Before that, I worked here full-time. And I say that because I think that's quite important to how we got to where we got to with these productions. I knew the people in the building. I knew the contents. I knew the structures and the kit. And a lot of that fed into sort of the score we got in the end. So there's two productions I want to talk about. The first, more of a traditional approach. I joined it a bit later, so that had its own challenges. And then another one where the Green Book was very much embedded in the ethos of what that production is going to be. So the first one, production called Pontypool. If you didn't see it, the director won't like this language, but think of zombie and blood. They were conversationalists, I think, but the result was the same. So, like I said, I joined it a little bit late, which meant the director and the designer had already got a vision of what they wanted. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible to be a sustainable show. It just made it difficult to make concessions for the sake of sustainability, I suppose. It had an 80 square meter roof. You know, you're not going to build that out of parts we found in the farm. So saying that, we did work really hard. So there was a couple of structural reuse bits of the set. The roof itself, I spent 2 hours with CTS, the set builders, trying to get away from building a new steel fabricated structure to hold it up. I wanted to use truss that was available in the building because there's a massive pile here. So we built the roof around this truss, and the only thing left was sort of the cosmetic cladding underneath. It saved £10,000 off the bill, but also saved all of that new steel. we used a lot of steel deck that was in the site. Any masking we made from masking we already had, or serge that was scrap serge. And we didn't build any new bracing or anything. We reused what we had in the building. The roof was pitched, so the design wanted the walls to have a pitched top. I wanted to build it in a bit more modular way. So the bottom section was more traditional rectangle flats, 8x4 flats, and the pitch bit on the top was actually a separate piece. So we had a usable walls that could go on to another life. And then we were just really efficient with materials. So the whole sage sat on 600 legs. But the venue didn't have that, and we needed 160 of them. I didn't want to pay for 160 legs, and I didn't want to use the steel for it. So instead, knowing the building, knowing the technical director, we actually made some small capital purchases on things like leg savers. So we only needed half the steel. It cost a lot more, but we could share that against productions. And in fact, we've recouped that cost already between the next sort of two that came after it. More than half of the consumables, there was 20 kilos of blood went into the show. More than half of that came from Branwyn and just the unused stuff from that show. All the rubber crumb came from that show, so we can claim that, they can't. And all the snow. We empty 2 snow machines worth every day. We were very careful with the blood to not get that mixed up. That was a sort of concession that the designer let us have, that we didn't pour two massive boxes of snow on top of the blood. So, and we turned a Henry Hoover into an amazing snow machine. And the main lighting fixtures actually came from Nye. So we saw that not long before our show. We phoned up National Theatre. They were good enough to lend us it. So, and that made up most of the lighting stock that was on stage. Obviously, we had a ceiling. There wasn't a lot of option other than that. And then the flooring and the subflooring were designed to have another life after. So we already had a show, and there was a compromise between the materials to try and give this 100 square meters of vinyl a second chance. And then the LD and the sound designer got given kit lists from the building that I knew well very early in that process, and nudged to not go outside that list too much. So actually, apart from the smoke machine and the equipment that we borrowed from National Theatre, everything was in-house. There were practicals, but they were all built in-house. The LED strip was all reused from other practicals, so were the drivers and the PSUs. Sorry, I'm going to keep to the script, because if you know me, I won't. So we got to basic, which surprised me. I think if anyone saw the show, the whole set was new. But what we did manage, between the roof and the amount of Metro deck that the set's set on, it's fundamental of the Green Book being an easy process to use, but obviously that weight can lie. But obviously our reuse from that show was 95%. And most of that was because of this modular design and the bits that we could take out of it. And costume, where we did get a say is a lot of costume was secondhand. So the second show, Nutcracker, designers in the room, so it's mostly compliments. We had a fully sustainable approach to the show. We had meetings long. We already had a relationship, 99% good. There's 2 moments I can think of where it was fine. But that helped us have, and we both have a passion for sustainability. So we were always going to carry that on into the production. So the show was mostly, the deck was the structure, which we had in-house. It lives 10 meters from the venue door. All the leg count, we did have to change the heights, but that was to fit in with stock we already had and treads. So we didn't make any treads for the show. We didn't have to cut any steel legs. The steel deck already existed. The floor came from Pontypool. There were 2 things. I can count on my 2 hands how many new things came into the building for the show. One of them was a 6-meter circle stage. we've done them or similar in the past where they've been wooden, completely wooden structures. We did try and find one, a stage that we'd give to W&O, and they were going to lend back, was just a bit too small and didn't fit our needs. So I used more steel deck, and I love AutoCAD, so we drew a plan where we had supported enough of this stage that all we needed was 18mm ply to top it. Where there were overhangs, because the deck doesn't particularly line up well with a circle, we lined them up to be where the cast went on and off stage. So not a great plan, but obviously when we put the treads in, the treads were the support in those corners. And then the only other thing we built was an entrance wall that had a hole in it. That got built to be taken apart on the get out. So it was a traditional sort of flats, skinny ply and timber that got screwed together. So on the get out, all the timber got taken away, put into storage. All the ply that wasn't the cutout, which amassed to one whole sheet of skinny ply, all of that went back into storage. So the only sort of recycled wood was this sort of edge. We use a lot of eco-friendly materials, so the covering for this stage was all unbleached calico and just a bit of painting on it. And again, the LD was given the lighting plan, another smoke machine that we only had to hire because the other one set fire to itself in Pontypool, came from venue stock. It was 100% LED as well. And I know some places can't do that. They don't have the stock, but we do, so we should. That got 89.7% source renewables. And I don't think that suffered from the same fate, because genuinely, other than a few curtains, it was used. It came from the building. And that had above 90% on destination, because again, most of it just went back into the building. And the designers reused a lot of that material that was new. So a couple of takeaways from that. That early planning was essential. That was the I don't want to say it's as easy as that, but that was a big difference between those two shows. And tech can be sustainable without compromise. The two lighting designs on those shows looked as good as they would have looked without using in-house stuff, you know. And we made some sustainable investments. So more longer term thinking. The leg savers are a good example. Some of the technology, we couldn't save them in one show because of the relationship with the venue. They could see how that would carry on. We didn't have to put it all into one budget to carry on. And then my favorite bit, just strong relationships. Dan's in the room from W&O. On that second show, they lent us an awful lot of stuff. We didn't even go and get it. You know, they've got vehicles that come back and forth, and they planned it on a trip that was already happening. So I've got to thank them a lot, between aerial hoops and kabuki systems and stuff. So lastly, I just want to share a little bit about how I track it. You asked earlier about the sort of adaptation from the original Excel and sharing ideas on how you track it. The Green Book isn't just about making choices now. It's obviously using those choices, learning from them to make better decisions in the future. And I'm a data geek, and I love programming. So I put those two together. I'm also productively lazy, so I hate doing things twice. So if I can do anything to automate something that I don't have to do twice, I spent my whole life doing that. As a production manager, I don't remember anything. I always say that in job interviews, which is a terrible answer to give. But I spent my life adapting systems to feed me that. And because of that, everyone always knows what I'm thinking about because it's written down somewhere. Oh, I went off course. So basically with the software, a lot of the time, the best time to use that kind of stuff is you've just bought something, you want to track it, or the set's just turning up. They're the worst times to sit down, find your laptop, find the power supply, find a plug to plug it in, open up Excel and log it in, and then try and work out the weight. So my idea was to sort of bake in all of that work when I had time earlier on during rehearsals. so that when I needed it, I could call it up really quick. And it essentially was a bunch of databases that you just had to join the dots to things that were already in there. So there was a materials database. I did, take a lot of that from the bottom of the Green Book. So how much kilogram CO2 is an 18 mil birch ply? You know, some of it's come from UK documents, but a lot of the useful stuff actually came from the Green Book. I put that into a database. So I put, that's how much a kilo costs. And then a common items one. I like this one because everyone uses steel deck. What you don't want to do is go off and try and 20 times find the weight of steel deck. I just type ST and then steel deck comes up. I select it. It gives me the weight. It gives me where I last got it from, which gives me the source and the destination. So I got this common items database. So steel deck, trestle tables, scaff legs, Steinway piano, stuff like that. Then a vehicles one, which you can add a vehicle. The fuel type is miles per gallon when it's empty, it's miles per gallon when it's full. And from that, if we get a delivery of a set piece that weighs 200 kilos, we can guess how much CO2 that's cost us between the laden weight and the gross weight of that vehicle. And I don't have to do any of that. I just put in how much that thing weighed. There's a suppliers one, which is useful for us to be able to attach a vehicle thing to a fixture database for lighting and stuff to track power usage, venues, props, people sort of database. So the material one knows the CO2 from making something. So instead of spending hours Googling sort of carbon footprint of MDF, it's got it. You don't need to do it twice. Also on that, I've put a lot of fabrics, so leathers, polyester, like as much material as I can find that were in addition to what was in the Green Book. And then what happens is we take the weight, so we've put the item in. If it hasn't already given us the weight because we've used it before, we just put in the weight. I've made a little button that says guess weight, and controversially that asks AI. So with mixed results. It got a Steinway pretty right. It gets steel deck horrendously wrong. And all it does is give you a number back. If it can't give you a number, it gives you a little speech of what it thinks it would be, and you can take your best guess. You don't need to use that. It doesn't. I know AI is maybe not the greenest product in the world, but if it saves time, I think that small cost of asking it for one number might be useful. So with all that in it, the system knows everything it needs because you've given it a weight. If it's a flat, it knows how it got made, and it knows what the material cost is. So you talked about tracking CO2 is an advanced target. I get that because it takes a long time. I did it for Pontypool before this. I got the database working. It takes a long time, but actually, if it doesn't cost you any time, my ethos is that sort of helps you, and I'll get onto why I think in a bit, but I haven't got long left. So the benefit for me is it was quick, and I'm lazy, and I can do it on my phone. So I don't need to go to my laptop to get Excel out. Also, if you work in a company, file sharing isn't always that easy in a production. So for anyone with a login for this can just go on it on the phone, and you know who's put it in, and there's no sort of wiping over someone else's Excel or deleting a bit off by accident. And then the reporting, so automated sustainability reporting. So it can build you. At the minute, it's quite basic. So the first page will tell you the headline figures for each of the departments. So set, costume, props, stuff like that. The score you've got, the weight you used, the CO2 you emitted, and how that fits in with the Green Book. So if you missed or if you were basic or intermediate. Below that then is the combined renewables score of that for the source, and then it gives you the same for destination. It then gives you a breakdown, and then on another page, it gives you a proper breakdown of everything in that production, all the materials it costs to make, its weight, its CO2, where it came from, and you can sort and filter it. And the benefit for that is the what-ifs at the end. I know there's a company in here that did a W3 or post-production meeting, whatever you call it, a press night and a pre-production meeting on the same day. That's really hard for the data from the last show to impact the next one, considering how early along that process you need to do. So if you've got a system that you could ask it what ifs, that might be helpful. So if you go into the materials and replace all of the ply with EcoBoard, what does that do? And all that takes a computer to do is 1 second, and it gives you all the scores back, all the CO2 back. And what if you replaced the vehicles that you own with electric? You know, it's just questions you can ask it, and it could give you really quick responses. So for me, it's those sort of what ifs at the end you can learn. I had a rule when I write software, it's got to make it either the same speed and give you more return, or just be quicker at doing something. So I think for me, if I can make it as quick to go into the Excel and put something in, but it gives me a lot more information back, that's a plus. I'm completely out now. Sorry, Steve. That's it. I'm just kind of hoping we can as a collective sort of use systems like that to make shows better and to help production managers when they really don't want to fill in this stuff, you know, when they're really busy in tech, to have an easier way of doing it, an easier way to share it, an easier way to display it with the team. Thank you very much.
Plug in first, sorry. Hello, everyone. So I am Christian Wallace. I am the Technical Services Director at the Olvic. I was previously at Charcoal Blue Theatre Experience and Acoustic Consultants for about 7.5 years. So I'm going to talk to you today more about sort of the technical aspects of the Theatre Green Book, and then a little bit just in terms of what the Olvic's also doing as well, because I couldn't come all the way here and not say something about my place of work as well. So do excuse me for doing that as well. Next slide, thank you. So as Paddy and Lisa have already said, in terms of the key principles for specifics in buildings we'll look at the moment, and then go into a bit more details, is obviously those 4 founding principles of insulation, efficiency, renewables, and then biodiversity as well. And the lean, clean, green, that was actually part of the sort of first version of that, but you can sort of see in terms of actually what we need to do in terms of upgrading the buildings in terms of what we need to try and achieve. Thank you. So there's 3 building types. Historic, that's the Olvic, 200 years old, and it's hard work, I tell you that. Mid-century, so sort of the 1960s, 70s buildings, and then obviously recent. So WMC would be classified as a recent there. But in terms of actually what we're looking like, in terms of what we can do, it really breaks it down nice and simply there, in terms of just high-level stuff. If you go to the next one, thanks. In terms of making a plan, what do we need to do? What do we need to do next? Having a look at the building survey tool, we'll go into it in just a little bit. Very similar slides to Paddy and Lisa. We'll have a look, but just in terms of those details around that. Developing that business plan in terms of actually what you want to try and achieve your building. Identifying where you're not doing so great in terms of performance, in terms of energy performance, but also having a look at overall maintenance strategy as well. Keeping that up. So it's all very well having a shiny new building, but if you then don't maintain it, that's going to be a waste. So it's making sure you're putting those all things together, keep on ticking over those easy wins. And then eventually, if you need to, planning those capital projects. And that's the point where you do need to bring the experts in, depending on the size of the project. Sometimes you can do it on your own. Depending on your capacity and your knowledge, sometimes you might need to bring in those experts. Thank you. And the next. So then having a look at the building survey tool, if everyone, has anybody used the building survey tool? Great, lovely. One person, fantastic. So actually, here's another question. Who actually runs a building? That'd be why. So if you do, or you're in a building, or if you are part of a building, having a look at the building survey tool is something really, really key thing to do. It breaks it down very, very, very easily in terms of the easy wins. In terms of basic, intermediate, and advanced, there's different levels in terms of trying to achieve that. Just going through them all. It's really, really simple. Going through it all, and it'll tell you what to do next. So just flick through the next ones. Maintenance project, and then the next one, thank you, is the capital project. So obviously just building up to more and more expensive and complex things. Easy wins are just those simple things that you could be able to do on your own. Thank you. Moving on to other areas of the Theatre Green Book and having a look at the toolkit. So there's some fantastic array of toolkits across all three of the parts of the Theatre Green Book, from producing, designing, making, energy purchasing, building management systems, carbon calculators, stage management, all those things. There's lots and lots of on there. So I wanted to go just into just a few of those details now. Thank you. And just have a look at technical equipment. You know, we can't do without it to put on shows. So first of all, it's knowing your kit, knowing how to maintain your kit. Where is it made? How is it made? And how much energy is it producing? So that you can maintain that kit. And not always just jumping to, oh, here's the next shiny thing. Oh, it's LED, it must be fine. Actually trying to understand where those things come from, because actually the production of all of these kit takes a huge amount of energy and a lot of carbon as well. So it's actually trying to find out that. Speak with your manufacturers, speak with your suppliers. And if they don't have that information, maybe trying to find somewhere else that does have that. Because you can't just assume the next big shiny thing's the best thing for you. Yes, you have to balance it with the artistic vision, of course you do. But having that other understanding of actually trying to find a bit more information behind that, working with a lot of manufacturers whilst I was at Charcoal Blue, and I'm continuing to try and do that now at the Old Vic as well, and actually going, guys, do you know how much energy it takes to create, you know, an LED unit? And some of them are going, well, yeah, we might do. Oh, it's like, for example, a new LED, a tungsten equivalent LED product will take about 1,400 component parts from up to about 15 to 20 different countries. The tungsten equivalent, probably around about 100 parts from about 2 or 3. So it really shows you the difference in terms of actually, if you're going to do it, do it. And overall, if you get the right product, yes, absolutely, they will pay back in terms of energy efficiency and also heat loss as well. That they do, but making sure you're getting the right ones. Don't just get the knockoff products and go for the cheaper products, because you're just going to keep on buying them again and again and again. Other things as well, just on those as well. If you do want to get rid of your stuff and replace them, don't just throw them away. See if you can try and reuse them elsewhere. So, or rehome them to local community projects, education projects as well. Yes, in terms of lanterns and in terms of obviously tungsten projects, that's a little bit harder nowadays, but there's other things you can do as well. Like turn a par can into a plant pot. You know, different things you can do as well. Try and think outside the box. Stage engineering, I won't go into too much detail, but do remember the 40-20-10 rule as well. So 60% of the capital cost is in mechanics, which can generally be expected to last for 40 years. 30% is drives lasting to 20 years, and 10% is computer control, which can last about 10 years as well. So, you know, over the course of about 40 years, you're probably going to be replacing that computer at least, you know, 3 or 4 times as well. So that's in terms of those big capital investments in terms of stage engineering. Obviously, I'm showing you there, the Royal Ballet and Opera. They've got a lot of money and a lot of stuff to be able to do that. I used to work at Sadler's Wells. I had to go through a lot of torturous process to get the system back to where it is. But it's there. If you don't have that, if you're just going for the manual stuff, manual's still fantastic. Making sure you're maintaining that as well. You know, obviously, in terms of manual labor and just a bit of rope and hemp, fantastic. But if you are needing to go for that next level of mechanics and automation, again, if you're going to invest in it wisely, but also have that consideration of where it's coming from and how long you're going to be using it for. Next, thank you. A little bit on energy. I don't want to go into too much detail and bore you all to tears around energy, but knowing where your energy is coming from as well, within a building, or even if you're coming to the building, understanding how much energy you're going to be using as well. A lot of the information and things we're looking at the moment is obviously stuff we can easily track. But energy, one of the reasons why we're in this climate crisis is down to fossil fuel, and that is down to energy consumption. So it's knowing if you can try and change to renewables, absolutely, as a building, but also if you're coming into a building, don't just assume that, oh great, well I don't need to pay for the power. Have that consciousness in your mind the whole time in terms of what can I come in with and how much energy am I going to be using? You know, can you add renewables? So this is obviously on top of WMC at the moment, fantastic in terms of solar panels. The of it at the moment we can't. So we've got a 200-year-old roof. It's a pitch roof. It's full of asbestos. Love to get rid of that. It's a bit of a bigger project at the moment. The asbestos is more of the priority at the moment. We might move on to it eventually. Have you completed an EPC? You know, even doing that at home. Does everyone know what an EPC is? So energy performance certificate. So in terms of actually having a look in terms of what you're building is how efficient it is. So if it's got leaks, so you might have seen them, you know, there's the color-coded ones in terms of A, B, C, or D, whatever it is. So having a look at that and looking at where you can make improvements as well. It's kind of it's part of the building survey tool overall, but knowing that as well. You could do that at home as well. And finally, in terms of grants to upgrade your building as well, there's lots of subsidies and grants out there, less nowadays, but there are some out there as well. Arts Council, it's a bit harder as well, but still seeing what you can do. Thank you. Seats. We all sit in seats for shows, but we don't really talk about them enough. So, which I think is a bit crazy. You know, I worked theatre for 20 years before moving into consultancy, and I went, oh yeah, we never really kind of talk about this when we work on shows, because we expect the audience to sit there. Actually, we have to have that consideration around that. This photo here is actually from Theatre Clwyd, which is brand new seats that are going in. So fantastic. Thank you for Dickie for the picture from that. So that's a charcoal blue, I think, picture. Is it direct? Yes? Yes. So hot off the press. But knowing how old those seats are and actually, you know, again, where they're made. Seats are really simple things. That's a broken down and blown up picture there of a seat. Not much to it, but actually, how can you manage to maintain them and upgrade them if you need to as well? So it's just in terms of making sure that you are maintaining them, when to replace them, if you need to replace them, what's going to happen to the other products as well. At the Orvik, we replaced all of our stools, seats in 2019. We've still got them all. They're sat. We've actually just lent a load to the Bridge Theatre, so they're using those as well. We didn't want to get rid of them overall. They're in okay condition. But in terms of what we're wanting to do, we needed to upgrade them. So having that consideration around what you can do with it as well. Waste is a big part of this stuff. We're great in terms of actually being able to recycle and reuse set. In terms of building products, we can do the same thing as well. Thank you. I won't dwell too much on the previous one, given the audience on there, but there is a new standard that is coming out called the very wordy name, UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard. They try to acronymise it as well. I don't know why, because there's too many letters anyway, but this is going to be a standard that's coming out, that's going to be rolling out across every single building in the UK. So, and this is actually going to be putting in place how to achieve more sustainable buildings. There's a lot of green standards out there at the moment. This is taking that next step further as well on that front as well. So if you ever are part of a building project, look out for that as well. And then final thing just on this section is training. Who's done carbon literacy training? Fantastic, but we need more people doing it. Click on that QR code, that's going to take you directly to Theatre Green Book webpage, where there's a wide variety of carbon literacy training out there. It's a full day, it's got to be, because it's an incredibly long and complex subject, but it gives you a fantastic base for it. So depending on where you are in the country, there's stuff online, there's people that can come to you in person. So this is the fantastic Jen Tellifer there. who is actually coming to the Old Vic next week to do some training. Whilst I was at Charcoal Blue, I delivered training. I go back to Charcoal Blue and deliver training for them as well. It's fantastic. So if you're kind of coming through all this and going, but why am I doing this? I don't understand it all. Do the carbon literacy training, which gives you that baseline understanding of where we are currently and what the theatre industry is doing as well. Fantastic, thank you. So a little bit on the Old Vic, but first of all, I wanted to talk about the Act Green survey. Has everyone heard of this? Good. Next one, thank you, Lisa. Just want to go through some of the stats around this. So 74% of the respondents said they were likely to view the organisation more positively if they had a Theatre Green Book certification displayed on their site venue comms, and 45% it would make them more likely to attend. So I think really quite startling facts and results on that front. 72% think cultural organisations have a responsibility to influence society to make changes to address the climate crisis. 58% expect organisations to reduce their carbon impact of digital marketing content. And final one on there. So 38% of the Old Vic respondents said that if an organisation showed lack of commitment to sustainability, they would stop attending or attend less than they had previously, and 28% of all respondents gave the same answer as well. And that is globally. That was across all 4 nations in the UK that has that. So what's the Old Vic doing? So the Old Vic, number of things on here. I've only been at 3 months, so I'm still trying to develop this, but this is stuff that's already happened, and we're pushing it to the next level. We have a sustainability working group, very similar to what the WMC are doing. We're meeting quarterly. We're trying to push those things forward. We're nearly at 40% of all full-time staff, and we've got the exec director as part of that as well, which is fantastic. You've got to make sure, if you're part of an organisation, don't just do bottom up. It's got to be top down as well. It has to be those leaders that are understanding the importance of this subject. We've got 100% renewable electricity contract. We are hopefully going to be part of, very similar to what's happening in Cardiff in terms of the heat district network as well. It's relatively new within London, but we're hoping to be part of that. Bureau Happold are coming in and helping us develop our sustainability plan in terms of trying to achieve net zero. We said by 2030, we've kind of redacted that, and we've actually gone to 2050. We'd love to be able to get to 2030. It's not that long away now, so we're having to try and put these things in place as soon as we can. We're plastic free in our bars with digital ticketing since 2016. And so we've been asking people not to print at home as well. So we were kind of ahead of the curve there. It helped in terms of COVID, and that's continued. So, some good things happened out of COVID. This very thing, the Theatre Green Book, came out of COVID. So, some good things did happen. And we are going to be upgrading our windows as soon as we can as well, which I know sounds boring, but it's kind of important. A really exciting thing that is going to happen later this year is we're going to open an extension to our building, and it's confusingly called the Backstage Building, but it's basically going to be an extension of the Old Vic. So you can see the Old Vic just in the background there. In the foreground there, we've got a 6th-floor building there, which is then going to have several connections to the back of house there. It's going to be it's a timber frame, which is fantastic. It's naturally ventilated, so we don't have any additional cooling or heating in there as well. So it's going to be interesting working with that. But in terms of what that means is that we don't have extra energy costs in there at all. We are going to be using the outside air temperature to heat and cool our building. The big thing is that it's going to be a community and education hub, as well as having a cafe bar there and actually some extra facilities for our production teams. Food offering, it's not going to be completely plant-based, but what we're doing is we're flipping around a menu. We're going to put the plant-based options at the top and then have meat down the bottom. It's too many times you think about the other way around. Where's the vegetarian option? Oh, it's the one bit at the bottom there. So, and I don't want tomato. Oh, I won't have this then. We're not going to be looking at that. It's south-facing, so we've got what's called a brise-soleil, which is effectively a solar shade. It's going to be made up of old theatre barn doors. So, and we managed to get them from about 4 or 5 different theatres across London. And you can see there, it's going to look fantastic. It's going to be lit up as well. It's going to look fantastic. And so it's got natural light on every floor as well, coming through there as well. So, really excited about that. Final couple of things just in terms of some shows. So we've currently got Oedipus in with Rami Malek in. And some achievements there. We aren't absolutely perfect at all. We've got a long way to go in terms of our productions, but some good things that are happening on there. 90% of all of our materials will be used again. 50% came from existing stock, and of that, reused the Brasillian masking from, I'll show you Mackinac, an iris header from Pygmalion, flattage from existing stock. We've also got all of our steel deck. We love talking about steel deck in shows, again, all from our existing stock as well. And we've achieved at least 80% in terms of our props. One of our big achievers is our next slide, which is A Christmas Carol. So we've just done our 8th Christmas Carol, but we have achieved advanced last year. A lot of it down to, it's on our 8th show, so we're able to reuse a lot, and you can see there. But that's the thing, we're just keeping on bringing the stuff back, making sure that it's all up to date. One thing which if you haven't heard about, is Power Track. So Power Track is something which the fantastic Rob Halliday has developed, and that is looking at tracking the energy from your lighting cues. So instead of having to ask the venue that you're touring to or is part of in terms of, oh, can you give me the energy readings from that, the lighting cues can actually work out what the lantern is, how much power it's being using, even down to different in terms of if it's got a very saturated color, it's going to use more energy than if it's more of a pastel color, it will use less, etc. And it will give you that, and it will track that. And you can also do an equivalent if it's an LED rig, what would it be in terms of tungsten as well. So we're currently working with Rob to do that. Rob's been working with the National and also the Royal Ballet and Opera in terms of being able to track that and put that out there as well. So if you want any more information on that, I'm more than happy to share that as well, because there's some really interesting information coming from that. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to jump straight into Q&A, and I can't see. So just jump a hand up if you've got any questions, and I'm going to then run around the room with a mic. I can't believe after all that we've got no questions. My God, I've got like 1 million written down. And I'm stood in front of everybody. And for me, I think this isn't really a question. This is more of a statement. So I'm going to say it while you're formulating questions. I think Paddy's point, your point about the network, this is exactly what we're trying to do. We really want to try and make sure that those that are using the Green Book already are sharing what they're doing, and we've heard some great examples already, and we know that there's more in the room, and we want to hear more of those stories. So part of why, we've been talking for many years, but what we wanted to try and do through Craig Cymru was see how we can expand the use of the Green Book further and support members and the wider community with the Green Book. And you may have seen that we recently advertised a champion role, which is what we're calling it. And I'm really pleased to say that our champion's in the room. Ruth, if you want to stand, do a little wave. Not putting you on the spot. It's a very early days, but the plan is that the role will help do a lot of things that we've talked about in terms of bringing those networks together, training, mentoring, and really kind of sharing the good practice that's happening. So watch this space for more information about that in the future. And yeah, I think some of the things that we've heard, some of your examples, I think great. Let's talk more about those schemes. It seems that people use it and then kind of then do their own thing with it, and I think that's exactly what you wanted to come of it. There's been examples where people have just kind of taken it and then made it their own. Have you got any more stories about that?
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really jumped out at me today, that exactly how the Theatre Green Book has been working for the last 3 years is what we're seeing today. I don't know if you've spoken about doing are you doing case studies on those 2 shows? Because it'd be really good to have those.
Yeah, we can make them available, but I think we're doing a podcast as well at some point.
Well, that would be so good to share that, to share those case studies that are really helpful for people struggling with the same kind of things. Love to talk more about the sort of calculator, the way you've developed the production calculator, because that's always in development. And then the modular point that you were talking about, and we're doing a lot of thinking about modular and how to make that more widespread and easy to use. So, and again, this is something that you might already have been talking with the rest of the Green Book team about, but having a look at the toolkit we've got for modular design and making, and seeing if you can make suggestions for it. If you could find time to do that, would be really, really great. We've already, when we were doing version 2, we were learning lots and lots from what you were doing here. So it's just double underlining that, we don't for a second think the Theatre Green Book is perfect. And as we all learn how to work more sustainably, it will change and develop. And that's exactly how it's got to be. And that's why it's so exciting when more and more people start to use it. The other, you were saying, have we got any other good stories about that? One that we really enjoy was when Lisa and I were invited out to Taiwan last October to launch the Mandarin Theatre Green Book. And in Taiwan, they've got some really interesting people learning to work more sustainably there. We spent a day with a puppet colony, they call themselves. It's a puppet theatre, who operate out of an old rice farm somewhere outside Taipei. And they were working fantastically sustainably and have been for years, long before they came across the Theatre Green Book, to the extent of, and this was the thing I really loved, it rains a lot because they have a monsoon in Taiwan, so they were collecting broken umbrellas and using the joints of the umbrellas to make puppet joints. It was the most beautiful, beautiful sort of creative way of using things. And also just the way they organised their workshop to make it easier to use offcuts rather than cutting into a new piece of wood, that sort of thing. And they'd been writing a guide for sustainable puppet making. We haven't got anything like that in the Theatre Green Book, so we were able to put that up on the website. We've oddly had some puppet organisations being in touch quite recently, and we were able to put them in touch with Lise Puppet Colony so that they could work together. It's that constant process of learning, developing, making it easier for ourselves, workshops here or at the National Theatre that are learning to work with textures so that you can remove them and then reuse the plywood underneath. That's something that now we've got networks, we can spread, share, not only across these nations, but across the rest of Europe and beyond as well. And that's how the goals we've been talking about start to become believable. We really can change this if we do it together. So the sharing, which we're picking up on today, which I hope if we have time to talk afterwards, there'll be more things that we can start to connect with. And that really is how we're going to make progress.
Any questions? I'm not going to force you. Oh, Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm from Theatre Yolo, a producing touring company. There's lots of initiatives and lots of conversations going on in Wales at the moment about trying to share storage and be able to, or databases of what everyone has, because obviously we're all trying to use the same things, and if we all knew what each other had, then it would be an easier process. And I just wondered if you had any good case studies of that anywhere else in the UK or worldwide that are doing that kind of sharing of storage or of sets and equipment and...
So the big one in London is the new National Theatre store. There was a case study that went into that to prove that this was a financially sustainable thing to do. So that's a big one that we know about. The other thing is that there are quite a few organisations who are saying, actually, we haven't got the money or the capacity to build a new store, but linking IT systems so that people can just see what they've got. We know that Trail software does that, and there are a couple of people who have put that sort of thing in place to share. There might be others in the room who are already doing that in Wales. And there's also a lot up in Glasgow who've got a Paddy.
Yeah, the other two we can think of is the GMAST, which is the Greater Manchester Arts Sustainability Team, have been talking about, and we haven't checked in with it recently, so I don't know where it's got to, a shared store. I think they were calling it the repository. There's a guy who's Glasgow-based production manager called Craig Fleming, who was developing a software called Centerline for smaller companies to be able to share assets. Trail is great, but which is Icelandic, I think. It's great, but it's quite expensive. Centerline was aiming to be a cheaper way of doing it. But yeah, it's such a good thing to do. And if you do get something off the ground, again, please do keep feeding back on it so that others can learn.
It's also somewhere where, looking at Laura, our production committee might actually know this. They're always a really good source of latest.
So probably starting small and simple and growing is a good way to do it, rather than setting the costs too high that you never then get to start. But we're all still learning, I think, about how to do it.
Can I jump in there? There was a time not too long ago where WNO were exploring the idea of essentially making like a media city, a feeder city where storage and production space and workshop space would come together. Don't know where that sits now in their sort of current climate, and they've lost sort of leadership that would try and make that change. But Cardiff Council also ran something similar on a smaller scale, but that's also been sort of stopped recently. But there are pockets of people out there that are doing it. I think it's someone to connect those dots, isn't it?
I wonder if there's a connection with the Royal Ballet and Opera storage in Wales.
And National Theatre have storage here as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What are the stalls that one might try and start linking?
This feels like a good topic, Ruth, for one of our first sessions. I'm going to, sorry if you've now thought of loads of questions, but time is rapidly running out. So I think it's better if we just wrap up this and then just grab people and have a conversation over leftover Welsh cakes, bits and bobs. Massive thanks to all our speakers for coming and chatting to us today. Really appreciate the time, and for everybody coming in the room. Thanks again to our funders, Arts Council of Wales and Charcoal Blue. Thank you to the team at Wales Millennium Centre who've been amazing, and to our live stream team. Watch this space. We will be in touch about the next steps in terms of the champion role and everything else that we want to do in terms of supporting you all with the Green Book in Wales. Thanks very much for coming. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Have a great rest of your day.